Hello and welcome to We Will Manage, the podcast exploring the weird and wonderful world of work. We are two young professionals figuring out our careers one conversation at a time. And today we're talking about working with friends and family.
So stick around to hear whether you should make a contract with your mother, how to navigate being married to your coworker, and why you should always draw a map.
I have the strangest dog who
Okay.
knows the strangest cues. So just before coming on here, I was at my desk and he's looking very expectant. I get up, he gets excited. I go to the bathroom and for him, he thinks that's it. That means we're going outside because she's peeing. So we must be then going outside. And it must be something that I do for him to get so excited about me peeing. It must be something that before his walks, I'll have a pee and then we go. So he was getting all excited and I was like, oh no, because we're recording now. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
And now he's
just emptying
sulking.
my bladder this time.
Yeah, that's literally no other ulterior motive. But now he's just lying on the carpet looking at me sulking. He's like,
You peed.
you peach. How could you do this to me? Anyway, I don't think we mentioned it in the last episode in the end, but Saoirse still hasn't found her headphones.
Oh, yeah.
So if there is any change we looked it up and in theory it's fine. We did a little test and it should be fine. Hopefully last week's episode was fine as well. But yeah, if there's any difference, that's why.
Yeah, I apologize, guys. It's becoming a running gag. I cannot find my earphones. I don't know whether they'll turn up, but I'm going to try and get new ones tomorrow anyway because I have a lot of traveling for work these next 2 weeks. And I don't want to do that without headphones.
No, don't do that to yourself.
Otherwise, I'll force myself to do productive things like work.
Yeah, whilst listening to crying babies.
Exactly. So if anybody has recommendations in the headphones to buy, you're too late because I'll have bought them already.
Right. So we're jumping into working with friends and family today. So what a topic. First off, have you ever worked with friends or family? Saoirse?
I was thinking about this earlier. Yes. So I've worked at professional level. I have worked with you.
Mm-hmm.
You did some work for my company.
Yeah.
As in my original company.
Mm-hmm.
And
Your new company.
Not my new company. As soon as I have the budget, I'll be paying you to do all of the branding. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, I wish I got an investor already so that I could give it all to Alba. Anyway, and I don't know if it's like work, but I worked on like a project, a big scale project for university, which was something called the personal project, where you had to set up kind of any project that you wanted to work on, but it had to be non-profit. So it had to be for a cause. And I worked on that with my ex, so at the time partner. So that was like working with friend or family, and also a friend of ours, but I didn't know her as much at the time. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Till now. But I've also worked within, like, the company that I have worked at had family members working together within that company. So it
So
wasn't
not your
my
family members, yeah. But you've seen it. You've been, you've been about. And this is a drama question. Is there anybody in your life that you think that you could just never work with, that you just would not work, that would just end
For
badly?
sure. Loads of people. I've thought about it a lot. My
Most
current
people.
partner, I could not work with.
Oh, really?
We work great as a couple. We are the best couple, but because we are opposites. If we were to work at the same company on the
You would
same
just bicker.
project,
Yeah.
we would, I don't know if we would bicker, we would just not work. I might be wrong. Maybe we would work really well together, but I wouldn't be willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
Because I prioritize the relationship over the whatever the project would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think we would be happy to work with each other on something like that. And who else? I could probably think of a fair few people, but
Yeah.
I think with most people you could probably try and figure it out. I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't want to maybe risk it, like you said.
Hmm.
So the first thing that I wanted to dive into is going to be we're going to go into it from a fact, which is that family-owned businesses make up what percentage do you think do family-owned businesses make up? The statistic is in US businesses specifically.
Mm-hmm. So how many
Ballpark.
of businesses in general
What
are
percentage of businesses in the US do you think are family-owned?
So
Ballpark.
family-owned, does that just mean somebody starts it and then keeps the work within the family until they have to hire external?
Yeah, it means that a fair few employees, normally at the top of the company, but not always, are within a family, and then they may then go on to hire other employees that aren't part of the family, but the structure, the main structure is family.
I think if we were talking turnover, I think if we were talking economically, I would say a smaller percentage. But if we're talking number of companies, I feel like all of the small companies, like shops, small business, things like this, I feel like most of them are family run. So maybe I'll say 60%.
Okay, well, yeah, you're not far off. It's 87% of all
That's
US
like 90%.
businesses.
Jesus.
Yeah, are family owned, which is crazy. This is from the business statistic from the Business Initiative. And so that leads us into, why does working with friends and family happen so often? Because your immediate thought is, don't do it, it's not a good idea. At least that's my immediate thought. Like, just don't go there. Like you said, like, don't risk it. But across the rest of the world, the statistics aren't as clear. But in Europe also, it was a very high percentage, which doesn't really surprise me. But yeah, a large amount of businesses in today's day and age probably hasn't changed much, I would say. It probably has always been a very common thing for businesses are family owned, and then probably a lot of those employees then are also friends of family that then join. So why does it happen so often? Why do we have this, this kind of model happen? And I think if we're looking at a company that's just starting out, you're building something new, which is, obviously how everything starts. Depending on family, one, they probably are already there supporting you in some way, shape, or form already. Whether that be emotionally, financially, in a lot of cases, you borrow money from family members to help start you off or whatever. So they are already up to speed with what is going on. So there's that ease. Also, you trust them. When you're starting off with a company, you need people that you trust around you. And there's normally, with friends and family, you trust that they are there for you and they're going to support you and help you, and it's a support system at the end of the day. And that because of that kind of emotional connection side, there may be more patience if you mess up, flexibility.
Definitely
Flexibility that if you say, look, this first few months are a bit rough and I can't really pay you as much as I'd like to pay, whatever, I feel like they're going to be a lot more understanding of that. So especially I think in the beginning, there's a lot of those factors that having someone that, friend or family, someone that it just feels like less pressure, maybe.
Yeah, I think also less of a gamble. Because I feel like when you're hiring, obviously you could maybe find somebody way, way better than your sister to do something, but you don't know. So if you know that your sister is going to do a pretty good job, then is that less of a gamble?
Yeah, at least to begin with, when there's already so many balls in the air of you kind of cut corners where you can. And I think that, hiring someone that you already know is just, like you say, is that feeling of, it's less of a gamble. Another stat is that almost 75% of small business owners who hired a family member, hired a family member as their first employee. And then they still have them on their payroll today. This is a stat from the 19th of March, 2025. So it's quite recent. 75% of people have a family member be their first employee, and they still have them on the payroll somewhere. Yeah, which is crazy.
I guess it's pretty difficult to fire your
Well, exactly, which leads us into the pros and cons. So do you want to start with the pros or the cons? The good news or the bad news first?
Let's start with the pros, because I feel like there are so many cons.
Yeah. It really is. So these are just some of the ones that I kind of thought of and then was finding. So the first one, which we kind of touched on already, is that there's that instant trust. You know, you can also, I think, because I had this with my first team member, that I said to her that I was very transparent with her that it was the first time that I was in that position. So we were going to be learning together that if there was something, you know, she could call me up on it and I could have that transparency with her because I knew her. If it was a stranger, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that, you know? So there is that instant trust and kind of...
I guess you know that they're not going to take advantage of you.
Yeah, exactly. And that they'll be honest with you as well, that if they are... you know, that if, like you say, so there's the side of take advantage of you, and there's also the side of, like, if they're not happy, you're hoping that they would have that conversation, which we'll get into if that is the case always. But yeah, that hopefully it's there. Another thing we've kind of touched on as well a little bit is the support. Bless you.
Thank you.
Is the support. So you feel like normally with friends and family, especially at the beginning when there's stressful moments and stuff, you can lean on them maybe more for advice and feedback and support, which you maybe wouldn't do with people who you don't know and that are just your employees, because it would muddy the waters. Doesn't muddy the waters being friends and family? Yes. But, you know, you have that extra support because it can be hard to talk to friends and family that you don't work with about stressful things that are going on in your work life, because it can just feel overwhelming to try and explain the whole backstory to be able to explain why that certain situation is hard on you or whatever. So you've got that extra support, all of that. Something that you just kind of mentioned on is, so we also have lower costs because recruitment is a long and can be quite expensive process. So if you know someone, we've also touched on this in other episodes, how many people do just get hired because, oh, I know someone who is good for that job, and it's just cutting corners wherever you can, which is just how the business world works. So that's one thing, lower costs. Recruitment is an example, but there are other, you know, you can just flexible terms in general, especially when starting out, that you can say, you know, would you mind for the first 3 months if we kind of do it and have kind of maybe more flexible contracts and all sorts of things. And the last pro that I found, I don't know if you can think of any other ones, is that you can have similar backgrounds, which may lead, which you would kind of hopefully know, to shared values. So you can know, like, so you said the reason that it wouldn't work with your current partner is because you're so opposites. So you know that already. You don't, whereas if he showed up to an interview, you maybe wouldn't know that in that interview, and it would slowly go, you know, revealing itself. Whereas, you know, we know that you and me work very similarly together and have very similar values when it comes to work. So you normally have a good idea of someone who is your family or your friend, what their values are, and if you think that could work. You might be totally wrong, for better or for worse, but normally those shared values are there, and that can help.
Yeah, I think if thinking of what the pros would be, that came up. So usually, if you're planning to work with somebody, a friend or a family member, you usually have some kind of idea of how you work well together.
Yeah.
Maybe that will change in a work context, but you usually have a bit of an idea. And also, I think you know the strengths of that person, and that obviously or maybe also the touching side, the touchy bits, and like you know that person better. So usually that means that you'll be able to change how you deal with that person, which is something that you have to learn when you get a new employee. You have to be like, okay, does this person work better with pressure, without pressure? All of the different things and different ways to communicate with somebody and how to work. You have to learn that with a new employee. Whereas if it's somebody that you already know, and even better, have already worked with, even if it isn't in a professional situation, if it's planning a holiday or something like that,
anything, exactly.
Then
you can have a good idea.
You have a head start.
Yeah, exactly. Can you think of any other pros before we move on to the juicy cons?
Other pros. I mean, it's a question that I've asked myself a lot, because I think we already spoke about this on the pod. Was now that I'm founding my own company, everybody makes the same joke. Oh, you'll hire me in a couple of years, and I always go,
yeah, maybe not.
But the thing is, I know all of these really, really competent people, and I know the people around me that are such good workers, but I would be so afraid to compromise or to put our relationship in danger.
Yeah.
That is it worth taking the risk of searching for somebody else to hire, where they might be less competent, but if it doesn't go right, then it's okay.
Yeah. I guess even like, so even if, imagine you're in that I'm not sure kind of situation of should I not, even it becomes awkward if you were to say my company's, if you're just a worker at the company, not so much, because you don't have much control or power over who gets hired. But if, like in your case, it's your company, even saying to them, we're going to be opening up interview process if you want to present yourself, even that kind of feels a bit weird, because they might be like, oh, but why don't you just want to pick me?
Yeah.
Because that would probably be a good way to, because just because they're your friend doesn't mean that you know how they are and what their accomplishments have been and, what exactly their work history has been. So them presenting themselves to the interview process so that you can choose them with certainty, even if there is that, what if it in any way affects the relationship that's pre-existing, you can still be confident that they are the best person for the job and, work out any ways to keep work and personal separate.
Yeah.
But even that would feel awkward. Oh, I'm hiring. Do you want to present yourself to the interview process? It would still, I don't know.
But also, I feel like hiring somebody that like a friend, it's like when you're at university and you're like, let's live together.
Literally. When you were saying,
great.
Yeah, when you were saying about like that it could go either way, basically. I think that's just with anything. Even when you're friends with someone and you decide to start being romantically involved, or like you say, or turn into a roommate instead of just a friend. Because there are some people that are amazing friends, and that's it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be romantically involved. You wouldn't want to live with them because they're messy, whatever. So, yeah, I think when there's any shift in dynamic in the relationship, it's a risk. Yeah. It's a risk. And yeah, a very obvious one is at university, oh, we're such good friends. Let's live together as well. So many friendships have been, that I know have been broken up because of that. Luckily, I never shared a flat with somebody who I was studying with or knew from university, because there was a few moments where it almost happened, and I don't know how it would have gone. In the moment, it all looks great and fine, and you think, oh, this could be really fun. But yeah, like in hindsight, you're like, yeah, thank goodness I didn't do that.
Thank goodness
why did we?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's dive into the cons then. So the first one I've put is that because we are human, emotion is always involved. Even if we say, let's try and separate, and when we're at work, we're at work. When we're, not, we're not. I think when you're giving feedback to someone, especially when if you're working together, as in they also get hired as someone to be part of your team, but you're on, similar kind of levels, then it might be different. But when it's you're their direct manager, boss, whatever, you're giving them feedback, I feel like it's always, no matter how much you try, I feel like it's going to be emotionally loaded. And that kind of, why would you say that to me kind of feeling is going to be there?
I have 2 interesting things to say here.
Say them. Give them to me.
Number 1 is, the other day I read something that I found super interesting, and it was like why couples in particular seem to get on each other's nerves more. And one of the things that they said was, when you spend a lot of time with somebody, you take down the walls that you construct with other people that you don't know as well. So like words coming from a work colleague that's only a work colleague, you're probably going to be more blasé to. Like you can take them better because you're like, you've built this little protection wall, and you're like, that's okay. Like I'll take it constructively, blah, blah. When it's a partner or a close friend, you've let those walls go.
You'd be more vulnerable with them. So it feels like more of an attack. Yeah.
So I think even if it is in a work situation, like you say, it's really difficult to then build those walls back up again, because if I'm used to taking everything you say and really it being super important to me, what you think and what you feel, then it's almost impossible to like build those walls back up again and kind of not care as much.
Exactly.
Like it is with a work thing. And also the second thing is I felt because like I mentioned before, you did some work for the company that I was working for a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And that situation, so we were working together and now we're working together on the podcast, but it's 2 totally opposite experiences.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main things there was I wasn't the decision maker, but I was in direct contact with you.
Yeah, you were kind of the in-between person.
Yeah. So I had kind of, not necessarily pressure, but I had another vision that was going on behind the scenes that I had to deal with. And then it went well, by the way, everybody.
Yeah, it's not ended because it got fired. And
it actually ended because a family member was hired. But anyway.
Yes, actually, which is also very, very common. I very often work with companies who are smaller and can't afford to have an in-house team. And then as they grow, then they say, we're going to take it in-house, which always is going to make more sense. It's just that some companies don't need it. Others do, So it was actually one of those situations that it was going to be a family member that was going to be working kind of more in-house. So all good. Nobody worry.
But like the experience was so different because working on the podcast with you, it's just, we have a small team, but the main team is me and you. Yeah. And we know how to communicate and we know how we work, and it's so much easier because we don't have any external influence that we're having to deal with except for just working with each other.
Exactly.
So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
I finished my rant.
Okay, another one I have is the boundaries blur. It kind of goes into it a little bit. I think it's just, by this I kind of meant that it's maybe harder to be like, you've got until Friday to give me this, that you can maybe a bit more lenient to be like, the deadlines can get a bit fuzzy, and it can just be a bit more like, oh, whenever you have time, rather than like, no, this needs to be done by Friday. Yeah. It can be maybe a bit harder to be, put in those boundaries a little bit.
And I think that comes down to what we were saying before about you also have a relationship, like a friendship or any kind of relationship.
Exactly.
And you don't want to jeopardize that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you kind of have to make things a bit edgy with colleagues to get things done, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. The next one I have actually is risk of damaging personal relationships is always going to be there. And then very tied to that is that it might be harder to walk away if it doesn't work. So the moment of being like, okay, this isn't working, let's find, like you said about firing someone isn't the easiest when it's someone that well, it can maybe a bit, if it doesn't work, how do you finalize that professional relationship and then hopefully still be able to hang out together as friends, or see each other at family reunions. It can be a little bit like, even just that, even if it kind of both parties kind of know it's not working and it's maybe a bit more amicable and a bit more just understanding all around, it still adds that layer of you feel maybe you can't talk about work in front of them because then there's just that extra little,
Yeah.
it just makes it a bit hard. There's an extra layer to, if it doesn't work, then what?
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like this depends so much on what the situation is. Like, if you have hired somebody because you are the main manager or the director or whatever, that's a very different situation than if you just happen to work at the same company.
Exactly. I think the main difference there is that in one of them, you're responsible. In the other one, you can both be like, oh, yeah, that B that fired you. I can't believe they did that, and it's something that could even bring you closer.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're the one responsible, because you're maybe the one that's saying, look, this isn't working, and I don't think you're working at the company, it's just not a relationship that's, going the way either of us had hoped, then obviously it's your, in quotation marks, your like kind of direct fault. Yeah. And they might blame you for being out of a job, which, it's just very complicated. Another one that I've written down as this very joined to everything, that it's just maybe harder to be objective. We've, with the emotion and the boundaries and everything, we've kind of talked about it already, that it's just it's no longer just this person who does certain things at this company. It's someone that maybe is struggling at home. And that's maybe why they're not doing well, because that they're going through a divorce or they, whatever, like, more about them. So it can maybe be harder to say, okay, this employee, we need to talk to them because of this, and this. You might be more lenient to think, oh, well, I know that something's going on. And
I think it depends on the kind of person you are and how seriously you take your company. Like, I had this conversation a few weeks ago with my ex-boss / co-founder. And I asked him whether he would ever consider hiring a friend. And he said, absolutely not, because his friends mean a lot to him. But his company does too. I mean, I concluded the second part. Like, his answer was absolutely not. I wouldn't take the risk for the friendship. And I also know that he takes his work very seriously. Yeah. So if you're always going to have to prioritize one or the other. If you get into a sticky situation, do I keep them at the company and jeopardize maybe the efficiency, but keep that relationship, even though that would be a bit of a weird situation anyway? Or do I prioritize my company and the work that needs to get done and, fire them? Yeah. I think some family companies, like small, maybe more functional, like shops and things like this, maybe you can just kind of, come on, just work a bit more, and then, but you prioritize giving them the job.
Yeah, because so I think we as humans are so complicated. So there's just so many layers, because another layer is like, if you do really care about a friend and they, for whatever reason, can't get a job and they need a job and they've got a family they need to support, do you say, lend that hand of, well, come and work for me?
Exactly.
It's so difficult, so difficult. The last con that I have written down, which I actually thought about afterwards, I was doing a bit of research and it came up in an article, and then I kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's that there could very possibly be, I think there always is, when it's a bigger company, that there's people who aren't friends or family also as employees, that there can be perceived nepotism, which I'm sure everybody knows. But I put the definition, just in case, that nepotism is the practice among those with power or influence of favoring relative friends or associates, especially by giving them jobs, and maybe within that job, just giving them extras that they wouldn't if they weren't friends or families. And I think that is something that you see so much, that, oh, well, his son got the CEO position because it's his son, but I was actually more qualified. I think it's very human to do that. Or, oh, of course his best friend came into the company and immediately is the manager instead of the, and that can just add tension between the team, between coworkers. It can add spitefulness. It can lead to awkward situations, and also kind of take away from people's expertise, because maybe they did deserve that job. But it is true that maybe they did have a foot in the door because of that. But that doesn't mean they're any less qualified. But, you know, so that I think adds a whole extra layer of just, like I say, I think it's especially in slightly bigger companies when there's other
other
employees that aren't friends and family, or even within, if it is just, for example, friends, and then, you know, one of them does get, it's like, oh, why did he, you know, as soon as there's those extra ties and relationships, I think nepotism definitely does show its ugly head, because as humans we love it.
I mean, it's a shame in both ways, like you say. So if it is truly there, so if they are giving more opportunity to the people that they know, or when it isn't there, if those people do get promoted or do get an extra job or a raise, then everybody immediately says, like you say, oh, it's just because they're the cousin of the boss's wife. And maybe maybe they're actually doing a really good job, but then
exactly, you get that taken away from you. Or the just typical horrible running joke of who did you have to sleep with to get to where you are. You know, that is nepotism as well. That's more of associate maybe rather than relatives or friends. But yeah, it's that thing of, oh, you're getting favoritism because not of your skills, but because of your personal relationship with the boss. So yeah, that adds stickiness. So those are the cons that I have come up with. Some of them, quite similar, with just it being just that we're not machines. So emotions and subjectiveness is going to get mixed into to everything, and it makes things a bit more complicated. Do you have any more cons to add?
I'm trying to think of like experiences. Because like when I go back to the examples I gave before, in the past I worked with my partner on this big project, and I wouldn't say it was detrimental, but it definitely didn't do the relationship any good. And it was actually opposite to what I would say now, is we were very similar in our working style, and I think the fact that we did know each other so well and didn't have this kind of protective professionalism wall meant that we just you know.
And that two passionate people don't always work well together, because just because your work, the way of working is the same, doesn't mean that the goals, you know, you're both passionate and motivated, but maybe if you want to go in different directions, then that would just be explosive.
But I can't think of any other particular cons. I think we've covered pretty much everything.
I have here, so another little fact, that is nearly 50% of family businesses report conflict on the job because of being families. So nearly half, and 41% say that it damages company-wide communication. So that's quite a lot. 40% of them are saying that because of having family in the mix of employees, it damages company-wide communication. I mean, that's so that's
I mean, like I said before, I work at a company that has 3 family members in the company. Don't want to say too much, but it's definitely
you wouldn't recommend.
I don't think. And not just in the way that they work, and not just because of how we as other non-family members conceive, because I don't think I think apart from being family members, there's no like favoritism.
So there's no nepotism involved. It's not something that you think is.
But I think it's more to do with the fact that their
How
communication is between family members, and it's less kind of controlled and less organized. I don't know.
Yeah. Also that, for example, you aren't going to be discussing with your boss work over the weekend. If they're at a family dinner on a Saturday and something work, they're not. How you could say, let's not talk about this now and talk about it in the office on Monday. But if you're passionate about what you do, like you enjoy talking about it, and so then, yeah, it's not a very formal communication. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it would be really interesting. Maybe you're going to get to this, but to go through the ways that you can try and optimize working with friends and family.
Yes, that is actually kind of the next section. I have that. I don't really know where to put it in here. From an online magazine called Entrepreneur. They've done an article with 7 key questions to consider before hiring a family friend.
Ooh, let's do that.
And I was maybe it would be nice to like break it up a little bit because the next kind of section that I have is red flags and rules to stay sane when working with friends and family. So, but yeah, let's do the 7 key questions to kind of think about beforehand that they've said. So the first one is, are we in it for the same reasons? I think this can be very interesting. It depends very much on if you're the one hiring, if it's a small business, if it's bigger, if it's, so many things to consider. But I think that is interesting. Is this something that is just a stepping stone for them? Are they going to be, just because I think it's good to handle expectations before getting into it? Whatever the answer is, I think is fine. As long as everybody knows, clarity, if this is just something that you want to do as a summer internship before moving on, that's fine. Or are you wanting to kind of,
start to climb the ladder?
In it, exactly, and be in it for the long run. So I think that's a really good question. The next one is, what is this person bringing to the job? And I've put, also known as, expect the same you would from anyone. So basically, what I took from this was, if you were doing a whole hiring process and you would expect this, and this from whoever you're hiring, does that person that's a friend or family also have those things that you expect?
Does that apply? Yeah.
If you were to send out the job application, would they apply? Would they qualify? Next one is, what will happen when we can't agree? So if there is a disagreement, is this someone that you think you're going to be able to sit down and communicate with and, work through it? Or is it just going to be explosive and dramatic, and because you're friends or family, they just stop answering you for a week and they think that's okay? What's going to happen when this is hard? Because it's very easy to look at how good and exciting it could be to work together, but in a business there's always going to be harder situations. How is that going to go, basically?
I think it's super interesting to go through these questions because I'm analyzing them as when we started the podcast, because not only me and you, but our whole team, so we're currently a team of 4, they are all indirectly friends and family. And I mean, it had its pros because everybody was happy and excited about the project, which you wouldn't necessarily get from a stranger, and willing to sacrifice time and energy.
For a project that right now is obviously everyone has to give their time. Without exactly, for free. So it's definitely a commitment.
Contracts are in place, but
we aren't exploiting people. Is that the right word?
But yeah, I think it's really nice because we have had to kind of deal with these different points, making the decisions to work with who we're working with, and even with each other. I think we've done a pretty good job in making sure that everybody was in it for the same reasons. This was one of the reasons that we started by recording so many more episodes than what we were putting out, was to see how, especially me and you, felt about recording. Were we enjoying it? Was it worth the time and energy? And to make sure
how was the dynamic?
Make sure we were on the same page, and that we were both excited for it. And then that's something that we continue to check on with the whole team, that we are all still in it for the same
Yeah.
reasons. And
Exactly. The next one I think is very key when it is going to be someone that's maybe more not necessarily founding, like working on the same level as you, but also it's not just an employee that hasn't got much responsibility, and it's how in sync is our risk tolerance. So when wanting to take those business risks, how in sync are you with that, which I think is a very interesting one.
I think you can be slightly complementary, but you have to be on the same level.
Yeah, exactly. In sync is not the same, but that, I think one person slightly pushing the other, I think is a good, and then another one kind of maybe making them stop and question. It is a good dynamic. But yeah, if one's just a totally loose cannon and the other one's completely not, then that's obviously going to lead to disaster.
All of these questions are also really good questions to ask yourself before co-founding something with anybody, even if it isn't a family member. And like questions that I went through when I decided to co-found what I now run.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it's the same. It's when there is a problem, because there'll be a problem.
Yeah.
How are we going to be able to deal with this? How are we going to have that conversation?
Yeah.
Are we on the same journey? Are we in it for the same thing?
Yeah.
And risk tolerance was also a thing. Like, does one of us want to take loads of risk and just go for it? And I think there, with my co-founder, we really level each other out. But it's super, super interesting.
The next one is also very much on a level when you're kind of more co-founding, which is something that we discussed a lot when starting up the podcast, which is what will each of our roles be, for that to be super defined. I think if it is going to be kind of that you are hiring someone, I think also just being clear on what the roles and responsibilities are is also important, especially for them. Yeah, exactly. Another very key one that we've kind of touched on already is how will we keep our personal and professional lives separate? I think when it is somebody, especially family, I think with friends, it can be, depends how much you see each other before that and all sorts of things. But with family, if you're going to be seeing them often, you don't want to have to feel like
you're always working.
And that if you're at a family event and it's Christmas and you're like, oh, remember that thing I told you? There's, I think especially there, it's just to have a discussion of, okay, we are going to agree that within office hours, it is professional, and obviously if something personal happens, and that's also fine, because it's just impossible to be working 100% those 8 hours. But when it's weekend, and we don't, we both give ourselves that space from work. And then the last one, which we kind of talked about when we were talking about the cons, is that if it doesn't work out, what do we do? Also just an important one to be prepared for, because it is very rare, especially at our age, that the job you're in now will be the job that you do forever. So I think it's realistic that there might be a moment where one of you wants to, move on, or maybe if it can evolve, then that's cool. But if not, if, one of you is saying, okay, this isn't working, we need to, how is that going to go? I think it's just a realistic conversation to have. And if it does end up being your forever jobs, then great.
But at least you were prepared.
Exactly. So I thought they were quite a good list of questions.
Yeah, good list. I think to go back to the point before of how you keep things separate, I'd be really interested to see this from your point of view, because I think you have a lot of experience with working with close people in your life. And like, for example, we, when we're talking about our podcast things, we have our podcast chat. Exactly. And then that means that you're able to have parallel conversations without one influencing the other. And like, I recently implemented that elsewhere because I learned that from you. Yeah. And I think it's a really nice way to do it, because it truly does separate the two.
Absolutely. For me, that's like a big thing. Even, so for example, my mom has a YouTube channel and I do her YouTube videos. We also have a group to talk just about the her YouTube channel. Whenever I do anything, and that, for example, that agreement there's no money there. It's a little bit like us with the podcast right now. So, but it's still a professional thing. You know, it's still not something that we would normally discuss in that length and detail if I wasn't editing her videos. So for me, like, that's a big thing, because one, it just makes sense for organization when you're trying to find stuff. You know, when you do talk on a friend or family, you know, close level, there's like 1,000 messages to say one thing, because of that's just how we text as a society. You'll be like, oh my god, you'll never guess what. You know. So if you're trying to comb through that to find things that are professional, obviously it's gonna be just a waste of time. But then also, like you say, to be able to have those parallel conversations, because we're human. So at the same time that something's happening in a professional, you know, there's also something happening on a personal level, and you want to be able to still have those conversations and them not influence each other. And that
especially
way,
if you're not in a set timetable.
Exactly. If I want to message you about something that's happened in my personal life, I feel like I could do that at 1 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, if you see it when you wake up or in that moment, it doesn't matter. But if there was something to do with the podcast, then I would be a bit more, you know, oh, well, it's 10 o'clock at night, I'll send this tomorrow. I'm not going to send it now. So I think it also helps you put those barriers in place, and you see kind of, you're literally separating the professional and the personal side of things, of the relationship. And I think it can really help for you to realize, I want to talk to them. Wait, what is it about? Where am I sending them this message?
That's really true. So like for you yourself, even before
exactly.
to know what it is. Are you frustrated because of a work thing?
Yeah.
Or, and so do you deal with it with the work conversation and what needs to happen with the work? Or are you frustrated in a personal thing and then taking that out on the work?
Exactly. So it's a very physical way of separating the things. And for me, it's just a no-brainer. So many groups with just one other, there's just two of us. So it's literally just a private chat, but it's called whatever the business is. And I think it makes for things to be a lot clearer for everybody.
And how about when you're in person? So like working with somebody you're very close to, that you spend a lot of time with, that you also are, you know, like working with and also being with.
I think right now, everyone that I work with, that I'm close to, I don't see them on a day-to-day basis. So I will arrange to meet up with them. So there is normally a reason why we're meeting up. For example, yes, exactly. And then obviously, so just yesterday, me and my team member, we met up to do some content creation, and we hadn't seen each other for a couple of weeks in person. So we met up an hour and a half early to have breakfast together. In that chat, we were catching up, and in that conversation, work things came up, but it wasn't kind of constructive. Also, it was like we were kind of, you know, being like, oh, this client is such a pain in the ass right now, or whatever, you know. We were like talking like, oh, like this, you know.
If you're listening and you're a client, she's talking about you.
So it was kind of like, oh yeah, we'll have to do something about that. And it was kind of a like, almost more like two employees who work at the same company, but no one's the boss kind of conversation, where you are just talking about it and how you're feeling about it. And that's something we'll have to look at. And, you know, oh yeah, I'm really sick of that or whatever. And it was more like a casual conversation.
You're not making action items. You're just...
Exactly. You're just, unloading with a friend about work. My dad just went by. So that's kind of one thing. Also then, for example, when I see my mum, she lives far away, and for example, if I go and visit her for 2 weeks, what we'll do is we'll set time aside. So we need to talk about YouTube. I would like you to do branding for this other thing I'm going to start up, blah, 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 blah. Let's make time, you know, let's say arrange your stay here, and then this morning we'll
make work,
block it off for work. Exactly. So rather than it just seeping into the conversation, it will, because it's natural. Like we'll say, oh, that should be a YouTube video or whatever. But again, it's not, you're not sitting down and making a plan for it. It's just something that, especially because with what I do, it is creative. So when something comes to mind, you're like excited to share it, and it's like, oh, you know, oh, we should do that or whatever. I think with us, it's the same with the podcast, that it's not, you know, it kind of gets, work things get scheduled in.
Yeah.
Personal stuff doesn't. Is kind of how is like main difference, I would say.
That's cool. I mean, I think
yeah.
it's really impressive when you can make that separation. And I think to kind of sum up everything that we've said up until now, if you are able to have honest conversations and communication with your loved ones, be that friends, family, or anybody that's close to you, I think it is possible.
Yeah.
But you have to really trust in that you're capable of that as two people.
Yeah. So that's a brilliant segue into the next part, which is, like I said before, red flags and rules to stay sane. And the last section I kind of wanted to talk about was actually just when it works beautifully, you know, because it can happen. So that's how we're kind of going to finish off the episode. So the first one is, which we have said this so many times in this podcast already, no contract equals no clarity, even when it's your mother. Contracts in place, like we were saying before, with what your roles are, and you know, just have that clarity from the beginning to sit down and make a contract, even if you know you're not going and signing it in front of a lawyer or anything, but it's something so that you have to have the conversations about what is happening exactly. We've done it for a podcast, and just I think that's just, and it can be awkward. I remember when we were having one of our first conversations with the podcast, and I was like, shall we talk about contracts? Because it sounds so official and so like.
It was so funny because when we first brought it up, I think one of us hinted at it.
Yeah.
Just enough so that if the other one was also thinking it, she would get it. And
she would get it. Yeah, we did. It was like, yes, let's talk about contracts. And we got excited about it. And I think it's because there is that stigma that, oh, you need a contract so you don't trust me? Which just is not the case. It's not, it's a contract is an excuse to talk things really clearly, things that you maybe wouldn't even think about discussing.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know when we were 12 years old and we would go out at midnight or whenever it got dark, which felt like it, right?
Or midnight,
and we would go on adventures. Before doing that, every time we would draw a map.
Yeah, we would. So things were clear.
We knew where we were going.
Yeah.
At least we thought we knew where we were going.
Yeah.
But we would still draw a map.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. So yeah, I think it's to try and take away that stigma of a contract means that I, one, either don't trust you, or two, think it's going to go badly. So, you know, it's like when people get all weird when people want to make prenups before getting married and stuff. It's like, oh, so you think we're going to get divorced? It's like, no. But I just think it's such a sensible thing to just be prepared. And I think it sets you up for success because if whilst making that contract, you're like, wait, what? That's what you think of. Wait, what? What do you mean? And then maybe you're like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe this doesn't make sense. How much time and effort and, you know, and you've maybe just right there saved the relationship because you might be able to be like, okay, well, let's maybe not get into business together and
let's laugh
stay
this
friends.
off and forget it.
Yeah, exactly. So number one for the umpteenth time, make a contract. Then the next one.
It can be 3 sentences long.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're on the same page.
It's basically just have that conversation. It's just, the next one is also something that's got so much stigma around it, which is money. I think when it comes to working with friends and family is when you have to be extra clear about pricing, about discounts, about my pet peeve expression of mates rates. I think it's just to be clear about it. Again, there might not be any money in the mix.
Maybe when people ask for mates rates, you could offer mates results. It's like my results, but not quite as good, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I can give you half the price if I put in half the effort or whatever. But no, I mean, I don't mind the amount of things that I've done for friends and family for free, but it's been talked about before. It's not the Like not supposition, the like, yeah, it's not exactly, you're not going and thinking, oh, but you're going to do this for free because I'm your friend. You know, it's something that's discussed, and I will say, I want to do this for you for free. And you know, not saying, and then you owe me one or anything like that, but it's just, you know, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and you know, I don't mind doing this for free. Okay, that's a bigger project, that's more hours, that's more time, that's more effort. We can do this part, you know, whatever, just work it out so everyone's comfortable, because again, it can just be something that people are awkward to talk about. So if you're kind of thinking that you should be getting paid, and then the other person thinks that you're cool doing it for free, and it just makes things unnecessarily awkward. So because they're friends and family, just be extra clear. The conversation you would have with an employee, well, that, but even clearer.
Yeah.
The next one is our favorite topic, which is communication. So to communicate is to communicate with them like a professional.
Who's got the rest?
We were already fans of communication even back then. Was that called G2G or something like that, that show?
Yeah, I think so. G to G,
You
gotta
go.
go.
So to communicate them when we're, like we were saying before, like when I do sit down with my mom to talk about her YouTube, we will talk about it. I will talk to her like I would talk to any client. Obviously there's a softness maybe that you have that you wouldn't have with a client, which I think actually when the more you work with someone, if you work with someone for a long time, it might also evolve to be more like that.
For sure,
but you don't talk to them like they're your sibling or your partner or your best friend in that moment. You know, you have a serious conversation to talk about, you know, you show your professional side. We all have very different sides. We are different when we're at work. We're different when we're with friends. We're different when we're with family. We're different when we're with our partner. So step into the shoes of your professional self, and obviously there will be nuances, but you can't just be like, oh my god, you're so stupid to start off a conversation, you know. You wouldn't say that to someone that you're working with, but you might to your sister. Stop being so dumb.
I can imagine you working with your sister.
So yeah, I mean, I understand that it's not going to be quite as cut and dry as it would be with a client, but yeah, to try and be more professional with your communication, I think is just sets you up in the right headspace and stuff when you're trying to do that separation that we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you say, if you get used to even changing how you are slightly when you work versus when you're not working, then that can bring this nuance of difference. Like you have your different WhatsApp chats or your different email inboxes or whatever. If you change your tone a little bit, they're going to know immediately.
Okay, we're in work mode.
Working. Yeah. Okay, that's serious business. I can hear it.
Let's stop joking around now. Let's stop saying that she looked fat in that dress yesterday. She's not going to like that. The next one that I put down is to something that I think that you do with your employees, or at least you should do, but maybe not when you have that relationship with someone and you're seeing them outside of work and stuff as well, which is set up regular check-ins or reviews and not just assume that everything's fine and that they would tell you if there was a problem. No, actually make time to have those check-in and reviews, which, like I say, should be happening with employees if they're not friends and family. And that, just because they're your friend, don't dismiss that and assume that they'll come to you with a problem when there is one. Like actually give them that space to talk to you.
That's a good, really good one.
Ask. Yeah. And the last one is to just be okay, with the questions. If you've done the questions and that we were talking about before, then you're fine. But if you haven't, to just be okay with being able to say to each other, maybe we shouldn't work together. Maybe it's not working out and I value you as a friend too much and this is just ruining that. Maybe we should take a step back and just, be okay with saying that. It can be hard and maybe you need to take a break from each other. If you realize you're not working together well and you can have that conversation, I think it's normal to be able to get past that. If you have a little break from each other for a little bit, for a couple months, and then come back together as friends, I think would make things easier maybe, because it's not, it makes it feel less messy maybe. And yeah, try and disassociate things a little bit. But yeah, to have that to be able to say, rather than just keep trying, even though it's not working, but you don't want to just fire them and, you're just, I'm trying to make it work, to just be able to say, look, it's just not working for whatever reason. Let's stop. Which
not mix the two.
Yeah, exactly. My dad just walked by with loads of courgettes in his hand.
Oh no, not more courgettes.
So yeah, like I say, if you went through the 7 questions that we were talking about before, this is literally one of them, which the last one we said, if it doesn't work out, what do we do? So in theory, you've covered this, but if you hadn't, that.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to separate that just because you're good friends doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be good business partners, and that not being an issue. Like, I don't want to get into a romantic relationship with you. That's a different type of relationship. Yeah, why do I have to want to be your business partner, Yeah. So, and I really like the point you said earlier of making time to check in, because I do think that that's something that's kind of between the two. So like, maybe I don't want to come to you with a personal feeling about work on our personal time, because I'm afraid that will impact our personal time, but I don't want to necessarily say it during work either, because we're in working mode and you're not my friend anymore. Yeah.
So to make time for that.
Yeah, to make time for that, like, in between, where talk to me about work, but as a friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a person that's a human being and has feelings.
Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah. Yeah. So it says that in a 2010 study of 518 family-owned businesses, it's not a huge pool, but big enough. The most successful ones had made each person's role in the company clear up front. They all, the most successful ones all said that the reason that they had been successful in having a family-owned business was because they had, from the very beginning, made it really clear what everyone's roles are. It's 2010, but I don't think this would change in 15 years.
I mean, I know a couple of family-run companies that I work with at work. Most of them are production companies. Yeah. And in those companies, the roles are very defined. So like, there'll be maybe the sister and 2 brothers working at the company, but the sister's dealing with the business, the brother's dealing with the production, another one is dealing with sales, like totally different sectors, so that they can each have their expertise and where they are the boss, and then they work together on that. Yeah. And then same in the others, more or less. So very defined roles and not necessarily one underneath the other. Yeah.
Yeah. They all have their own kind of thing and their responsibilities and their, and the last thing I just wanted to touch on, because we focused a lot on how it can go wrong, which I think is really just because it's so easy for it to go wrong, because you can go into it so naively. But it can work beautifully. Exactly. Because it can work so beautifully, because those pros we were talking about before, about having that support system inbuilt in your work and having people that you trust to work with that are going to be able to, you're going to be able to focus on, if someone that you're working with is your friend and they are in charge of a certain part of your company and you can trust them, you can focus on your parts, and you can trust that they're also in it for the right reasons. They're also got the, company's best interest at heart. Not to say that people who aren't your friends and family wouldn't. It's just something that you can get there quicker. And it can work so beautifully. And I think what makes them work is what we've talked about today, and what I've seen kind of researching this episode is just having those clear boundaries, so that whether that be defining roles, defining contracts, separating your different life aspects of work or personal. But that's what makes them work, is being able to, right now I'm working with you, right now I am not working with you. And it can make really beautiful collaborations and beautiful work. So I think it absolutely, if it's set up correctly, can be a really lovely thing. Because, I mean, it's so much of our day-to-day as well, our work.
Yeah.
So if you can also be doing it with people that you enjoy spending time with,
Exactly.
then that just
that's
makes...
a big one. Like
Yeah.
enjoying being
Yeah.
able to work with people that you like and
Yeah.
enjoy spending time with and
Exactly.
have the same humor and then that's
Absolutely.
a real pro.
Absolutely. Exactly. So yeah, it's not all bad. It's just
Be very wary.
be very wary and set things up correctly. Have the hard conversations up front from the very beginning, and then you're golden. I would say.
Good to go.
You're good to go. We've got a couple of little listener questions and dilemmas to close off the episode here. So we're gonna dive in and see. Right. So too long talking now. I hired a friend to help with some client work, and now the dynamic is off. They're not treating deadlines seriously, but I feel awkward confronting them because we're close. How do you navigate friendship and professional boundaries? So this is interesting because they're already in the situation. You can't say, oh, well, you should have made a contract. Well, you should have. No, because they're already in the situation. You've learned from this. If you do ever hire a friend again, which is definitely something that you shouldn't like rule out, just because it hasn't worked with this friend doesn't mean it's not going to work with any friend. But yeah, they're in it. I think you have to treat them as you would any employee and just say we need to have a conversation.
Yeah. And then what I kind of want to say is it comes down to good communication. So go to our 2 episodes ago because there is a way to have that conversation without them having
being
to get
accusatory.
defensive.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it comes down to, are you able to have a clear, constructive and honest conversation with that person to try and get you back on track? Because maybe they haven't noticed. Maybe they're not on the same page as you. Maybe they haven't realized it. And that
what's going on for them is completely different. Their perspective could be totally different. And I would start the conversation just to make it really clear and help with that defensiveness maybe is to say, the reason I want to have this conversation with you is because I value you as a friend and I don't want to lose that. So I feel like this is really necessary because I'm struggling. I'm not happy right now. And hopefully, if, like you say, that you're close and they value you as a friend, then that will open them up to say, that is not my intention, and what can we change? You never know. Maybe it's salvageable. Maybe now you can say
beautiful advice, Bean.
Maybe now you could set after that conversation, set up a little contract again from a very open and honest place. Next one, my friend became a client, which is a different kind of relationship. Again, you're working together, but if you're self-employed or whatever, and they hire you rather than kind of working at the same company. So my friend became a client, and everything was fine until she started missing payments. I don't want to ruin the friendship, but I also need to be paid on time. How do I bring it up without creating drama? See, money. I think money is definitely probably one of the most tricky things to talk about with family and friends when you're working together. I think it can just be really awkward, especially if in this case you're saying that she started missing payments. So it sounds like she owes you, probably quite a bit of money. So hard.
I think you would start off by bringing it up with correct communication, the best communication possible, saying that it's something that you depend on as a worker, as a supplier, and I'm just heads up. I need to have this conversation because I'm depending on this. And then once you've had the conversation let them know from now on, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to,
if there's no payment, I can't keep working.
Yeah,
it's just as simple as that. Yeah.
As any other client, unfortunately.
I would also maybe for that first kind of just, first time you address it, maybe it be from a place of, oh, I just noticed, in case you hadn't noticed that the last few payments haven't come through. In case, who knows, maybe as they are close to you and they've got a lot of other stuff going on, that isn't a priority for them because, again, like we said before, they feel like you would tell them if there was something off rather than actually saying, oh, wait, did I pay you? You know, they're just like, it's fine because if not, they would have said something. Or maybe that is, you know, maybe it isn't a intentional thing. So you bring it up as a, you know, oh, I just noticed the last couple of payments didn't come through, just making sure that there isn't an issue on my end, you know, let me know. And that opens it up. And then who knows? Hopefully they won't come back with drama. All right, we have another one, which is I work with my partner and sometimes it's amazing. But when we argue personally, it spills over into our business. Is it possible to actually separate the two? I think with a partner, it's even more difficult because normally, as a difference from friends and family, you are also living together. So if you work together and then if it's the same department and the same, you know, you're spending all day together and then you go home together, it can be a lot harder to separate. I think it is actually possible, but I think you have to work extra hard at it and very much be very clear with each other that both of you are allowed to bring each other up on it and be like, whoa, that's work, we're at home, let's not, you know. And then the other way around, we're at work, that's personal, that's not, you know, and be able to call each other out on it and it not be an issue that if you say we're not, you know, it's really tricky. I think it's the being at work together and then being at home together aspect of it.
I think it's almost impossible to internally make that separation, like not bring feelings into the different sides. So yeah, I agree. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I do think it's possible.
Yeah.
To
Maybe a way of doing it would be that you have a ritual that when you finish work, you do something as a couple to then start. So for example, if you get out at 5, maybe after work, you go for a coffee. And in that coffee, it's maybe a transition period. And after you finish that coffee, you're in, you know, couple mode, not in work mode or something. Yeah. To have some kind of little ritual that you do that kind of marks the end. I think especially, I don't know obviously from this, but a lot of people now also work from home together. So there's literally no difference between being at home together working and being at home together just as a couple, as living. So to have something that really marks the end and you're not allowed to talk about, you know, the other thing when you're in the other one.
I think that's a good idea to have that kind of little transition period, like you say. So like have, for example, if you walk home from work, during the walk time, maybe there are things that you wanted to talk about work, but you didn't get the chance, but you really want to talk to them. But by the time you get home, then it's over. Or it's over. By the time you leave the coffee shop, then it's over. And you have to deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And not
maybe even like walk home separately. Have a little moment apart and then you can come together again at home or something. That's Who knows?
I mean,
whatever works for you.
I think that's
something
in any couple life, especially if you work together, is to then have things that you do separately. So like do your sport or meet your friends.
Yeah, maybe after work you each go to the gym separately. Even if it's the same gym, like go to different parts of the gym, something, so you have your you time, you do, and then you come back, and then after you've done that, whatever, you know, find some way to really separate it so that you can, it's easier. The more you separate it physically, the easier it is to separate it emotionally, is what I found. So it's just to figure something out for you guys. And the last one, I have no idea how long this has gone, but I feel like it's not been a short one in the end from the light situation. The last one is I hired a family member to help with admin because I trusted them. But they've made so many mistakes, I now spend more time double checking their work than doing my own. Should I fire them or just suffer through it? Just suffer through it, obviously.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, again, a bit like was it the first one, of just kind of try and treat them as you would anybody, you know. No one wants to be micromanaging. We've talked about that also on many episodes before. So with whoever your teammate, employee is, that's just unacceptable, obviously. So yeah, again, with listening to our communication episode, find ways to bring it up in a soft way, because you're saying, should I fire them or just suffer through it? I mean, there is also the chance of talking with them and seeing if it'll change, giving them a second chance, just in case.
I guess like making mistakes, that's a tough one. Like if it's that they're not meeting their deadlines, but still getting the work.
The problem is also they don't specify here how long it's been going on for. If it's just like one mistake, then obviously what you would do is you would have a meeting and talk about this and ask why it happened. Is that harder when it's your brother? Yes. But obviously if this has been going on for 6 months now, how unaware is somebody that they're not noticing? But then also if you've been saying, oh no, it's fine, and fixing everything, then maybe they wouldn't notice. So it kind of depends on the situation. Can it be, is it salvageable? Then maybe give it a go. If not, then save the relationship.
Something.
It's a family member as well.
Yeah, if you want to keep them hired, maybe try and find something else for them to do that they're better at. Yeah. I'd say is maybe an option. And if there is nothing, then let them go train somewhere else.
Exactly.
Put it into their career perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I've just come back onto Riverside and seen that we've been at 1 hour 17. So it's not as bad as I thought. I was getting worried. Yeah. It's just been a very dramatic light change while we've been talking. So it looked like a lot longer.
Sun went down.
Yeah, sun went down. So yeah, that is our episode on working with friends and family. I feel like it's definitely one of those topics that I feel like we could talk about for a long time because there's so much in there.
Yeah, I'd love to hear like stories of people that have worked with friends and
family.
Oh
my God, yes.
Maybe
good and bad.
Yeah, translate it into any situation. So like maybe it was a friend that you decided to live with, or just changes in dynamics and how that went. Yeah. Maybe I'll send a couple anonymous stories in. Yeah.
Yes. I'd love to, if you did do that, I would love to see if I
recognize
it was from you or not. Listener or mine story. But yeah, so that was working with friends and family. We hope you enjoyed, and like we said, we'd love to hear your stories, because I'm sure there are plenty. Yeah. When I started, I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but it was really fun doing the research for this one. And yeah, like we mentioned in last week's episode, we now have a new, I don't even know what to call it. Is it feature on the podcast? We have a new series called We Will Manage Mondays that are going to be. It's going to be at the last Monday of every month, and if you give it enough love and people enjoy it, then it might turn into a more happen more often.
Yeah, common occurrence.
But yeah, we're kind of testing the waters with it, because it's something that it kind of happened naturally a couple of times and we enjoyed it. So we thought we would make it an extra thing and see how people will find it and how people react to it. So if you have enjoyed the first one, I think the next one will be coming up soon at the end of July. We'd love to know. Let us know if you're enjoying them, and give us any feedback. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any messages to send us on We Will Manage Podcast on all platforms, we're here. And aside from that, see you next week.
See you next week.